So I went and saw Paranormal Activity 2 last night with my brother and a friend of mine. Just to give you a bit of a background, I watch an awful lot of horror movies. Horror movies are my thing. There are certain horror movies that really make you creep up, really uncomfortably under your skin. My favourite horror movie to date is The Shining. I cannot say enough good things about The Shining. Recently, there was that Spanish movie which is called Wreck, which is effectively Blair Witch meets Blair Witch Project meets 28 Days Later, set in an apartment block, and it's all in Spanish. That was terrifying. I mean, that was a movie that was just flat out balls to the walls terror. That said, Wreck does rely an awful lot on full blown horror, things screaming in your face, blood splurting on the walls. The thing is, I've always found ghosts, and anything ghosts or hauntings or anything supernatural in that respect, I've found it all that kind of stuff far more terrifying than a million saws. I mean, gore is not scary. Gore is just repugnant and repulsive to look at. There's a difference between kind of horror and terror, if you see what I mean. Horror is just that emotion of horror, that kind of, whereas terror is just feeling so incredibly uncomfortable that you genuinely almost feel somewhat unsafe. It's almost you're so scared that you feel like your personal space has been violated because of how frightened you are. The original Paranormal Activity did do that for me. It is definitely one of the most frightening films I've ever seen. And it was the first time I've had to sleep with my light on since about the age of 6. It just made me feel genuinely unnerved, uncomfortable. That subgenre of horror, the found footage subgenre of horror, is generally quite consistent. Just look at the track record. It's Blair Witch, Cloverfield, Paranormal Activity, Wreck, any of these sort of things just do feel genuinely, you just do feel rather uncomfortable whilst watching them. Like I say, the sense of immediacy there. Paranormal Activity 2, I went with my brother and a friend of mine. We'd all shared our stories about how frightened we were at the first one. My brother, he went and saw the original one at the cinema, and he said it was one of those experiences where there was just no nervous laughter. People were just getting so scared that there was just nothing to laugh about because it was affecting them that much. Now, there are problems with Paranormal Activity 2. Fairly big problems. Its plus points manages to retain that immediacy that is found within the found footage subgenre. Okay, so it's just the sense of time, place, now, then. It keeps the found footage aesthetic and takes it just that little bit further. Rather than being one person with a camcorder, you've got security cameras now that are documenting everything. Thirdly, the continuity with the first film is as good as it is with the Saw movies. Spoiler warning. I mean, the film itself is not really so much a sequel as it is a prequel. It actually takes place before, currently, and after the events of the original Paranormal Activity. I really like the fact that they managed to tie it in that way. The original actors come back, and my main problem with it is this. I mean, the first one is slow. You're not sitting there going like this. It makes the paranormal stuff somewhat inconsequential, and it literally kind of goes on this gradient like this. It starts off fairly minor, and then it just escalates to the point where the shit really hits the fan. The problem with Paranormal Activity 2 is, firstly, a lot of the scares are very similar to the way that they're set up in the first film. Heavy footsteps on the floor, bangs on the walls, shadows over walls, that sort of stuff. Despite the fact it's a year down the line, it somewhat seems old. I mean, the audience is kind of attuned to the illusion now. It doesn't seem quite as scary. There is actually one frightening moment where you see someone sleeping on the sofa and you see a shadow fall over them. But unlike the first film as well, this second film, it telegraphs when the demon is going to appear. Literally is this low rumble within the soundtrack. You kind of get this, and then suddenly, boom! And then a scare happens and everyone throws up their popcorn and it's like, the steady gradient that was found in the first film in terms of its pace is not found here. There is a difference between slow burning and slow. The first one is slow burning. Paranormal Activity 2 is just slow. I mean, the first half of it, you are kind of, I found myself going, oh, come on, I won't lie to you. I mean, the first time when it says night 1, like it did in the first, when it says night 1 across the screen, I got goosebumps. Literally nothing happens until about halfway through the film, and the big scare that happens halfway through the film that kind of makes the second half, that much better, actually happens during the day. But once it hits that halfway point, it does pick up. I mean, despite not being as frightening as the first one, there are scares in it that are just flat out shit your head through your arse type frightening. That scene during the day, the frightening bit that happens during the day, it's one of the biggest scares I've had in years. There's like a revisit of the person getting dragged out of the bed in the first one. It's just that much more aggressive. But at the end of the day, it's just because it is so similar to the first one that it kind of lets it down a bit. So whilst moments of it are creepy, like you've still got the static shots, and you kind of end up scrutinizing everything. So when like a baby is the baby's dragged across its cot, or you see a shadow fall over a wall, or you see a rocking chair going, your heart starts racing. But because the first half is so slow and the second half it kind of goes all out, like bang, 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 it doesn't creep under your skin quite as much as the first film. I mean, it's not bad effort. I mean, it's a lesser sequel to a better movie. That's not saying it's bad. I mean, the film itself has got a lot of good things going for it. The performances are still perfectly fine. The film in itself is innocent, inoffensive, fairly creepy in places. It's just a simple case of a sequel not being as good as its predecessor, really. The first one came out of nowhere, managed to succeed in making an extraordinarily frightening experience on a very, very small budget. This one has got, literally 10 times the budget, and, just a third of the scares. It's not a bad film. It really isn't a bad film. And if you like to be scared, there are some genuinely scary moments in it. It feels slightly old, slightly rushed, and it ends very, very abruptly. I would give it 3 out of 5. Just flat, straight down the middle. It's no worse than 3 out of 5, and it's certainly no better than 3 out of 5. It doesn't do anything more. It doesn't, and it's certainly not as good as the first one. If you fancy going to get scared this weekend, there are worse movies you can see. Basically, let's just put it that way. Speak to you all soon. Adios. Ciao.